Hey, what's up everybody? Today we have a slightly different video for you. Given that it's after Thanksgiving, we are doing a Christmas song today. So before you all click away, the reason I'm doing this Christmas song is because this is one done by Skillet, which is a Christian metal/rock band. And when they released this track, there were a lot of users on X who were making comments and takes that this song was demonic, and a lot of it was attributed to the style of the song and the way that they had one particular part in this track. And so I do think this does betray some views within kind of the broadly evangelical and Christian space around mental health and the way that we deal with struggle, and so that's why we're talking about it. Whether you are familiar with this particular Christmas hymn or not, I'm going to break down some of the background of it, what it means, what some of the verses are talking about, and then we're going to connect it to how this relates to mental health and how evangelicals and Christians might tend to interpret things in light of that, and how that could have been seen as demonic because of the difficulty that we sometimes have in American Christian circles. And I say this kind of as a broadly evangelical Christian circles, the difficulty that we have with the ideas of mental health and that the world is not the way that it should be. So before we dive into it more, please do like and subscribe. I am wearing a Therapy Today shirt. Our store is open and we do have a free shipping offer right now, so check the link in the description below. This particular shirt has the logo off to the side and it's really comfortable. It fits really well. So check out the store, support the channel that way, and let's talk about this song in particular, O Come Emmanuel by Skillet. So O Come Emmanuel doesn't fit quite the larger umbrella of Christmas music per se. So there's a separation between the season of Advent and the season of Christmas. And so O Come Emmanuel, Emmanuel being a word in the Bible that means God with us, which throughout the story of the Bible was the goal of God's people or for his creation to be with God. And then when we sinned, everything broke down, relationships were damaged, and the fundamental relationship between humans and God was damaged through that sin. And so now the dynamic is reversed. Instead of people trying to get back to God, God is coming down to us. And so this song is a song of anticipation of that. And because of that, it is in a minor key. It is sung in a way that is longing and recognizing the hurt in the world, the way that things are not the way they should be. And so this song is calling for God to come down, God with us. And so all of the verses and the chorus reflect that. And so what we'll see throughout is that this message of that it's an Advent song makes a huge difference in the way that the music video is done and the music itself is done, so that I don't think it's actually satanic. I think it's actually a helpful interpretation of the way the song is sung, and that a lot of the pushback is actually from evangelicals who have lost the message of what Christmas is really about. So without further ado, let's jump into the song. Let's listen to what it sounds like.
O come Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel.
All right, so let's break down some of the lyrics. Again, I'm not assuming that everyone in my audience is Christian, so I'm going to talk through some of the lyrics, but you can just see from the framing, he's in a hospital room, there's an empty bed. It could be representing struggling with suffering, struggling with death, just the inevitability that our health is something that we take for granted, but that we lose over time. And so he's saying, O come Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel. And so in the Bible, Israel was God's chosen people. I'm not getting into the politics of Israel as a nation today, but just historically, Israel was God's people, and they would sin, they would walk away from God, they would choose other gods, they would do other things that he has not commanded, they would break that relationship with God. And then the cycle goes, they would be punished for that, and they would just experience the negative consequences of walking away from God until they return and cry out for God. And so this is a song of longing for that relationship back. And so in the Bible, the imagery goes, we are captives to sin, captives to the devil, and Jesus comes to ransom us, buy us back from that slavery. And this is also mirrored in the story of the Israelites being made slaves in Egypt for, I think it was 400 years. And they were crying out to God during that time and feeling like he wasn't answering until God sends Moses to rescue his people out of slavery. So there's a lot of parallels between that story in Exodus, which we are hearing some allusions to in this song, connected to the actual Christmas story.
That mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appears.
So in the Old Testament, God promises his people a land. They call it the Promised Land. Eventually, it turns out that's the land of Canaan that God is giving to his people. Again, there are some geopolitical things here within the modern day that I'm not getting into. But just within the story of the Bible, when the Israelites are in exile in Egypt, they know, they have this understanding that this is not their home, this is not where they're supposed to be. They hold on to God's promises that there is something better, but that things are not right now. And that's a lot of what's echoed in the story, in this empty hospital room with a lot of medical equipment and this tone of mourning with the minor keys and the solo voice where it feels like we're struggling on our own. We're isolated in this world where this is not how things are supposed to be. And that is setting the stage for Christmas, for Advent, for the coming of God with us. So now we get to the chorus.
Oh, come thou rod of Jesse free, thine own from Satan's tyranny.
Okay, so they actually go straight to the second verse. That's my mistake. I am a music director at my church, so I'm used to going straight to the chorus after that first verse. Okay, so come thou rod of Jesse free. So King David, for which we have a lot of famous Renaissance art modeled after King David, his father was named Jesse. And so the prophecies in the Bible go that Jesus was going to come from the line of Jesse, from the line of King David. And so this is calling for that direct lineage from King David to come and free his people from Satan's tyranny. Again, that image of people being enslaved to sin and being captured by Satan. So honestly, yes, this song does address satanic influence and demonic influence pretty clearly, but it's a little different from how people are interpreting it and having this really strong pushback. Again, it's mostly to the style of the music. So far, it's been pretty tame in terms of Skillet standards, but stay tuned. There's definitely some more that's gonna really amp it up a lot.
From depths of hell thy people save, and give them victory o'er the grave.
All right, before they get into the chorus, I know they're actually getting into the chorus this time. From depths of hell thy people save. Pretty clear so far. And give them victory over the grave. So in the Bible story, death comes because people sin, because people broke that relationship with God. Sin and death and all of these things that we know are wrong in the world now entered into the world. And so this does get into some of the mental health stuff that we struggle with now on a daily basis, and recognizing that's a result of sin and the relationship between how faith and mental health interacts. That's where I think the big problem is in this interpretation of this song, and how people have difficulty with the emotion and the rawness being expressed in this. You get a little taste of it here, just even in the vocals and the instruments that they use. But I think culturally and style-wise, this so far is within bounds for what evangelicals tend to be comfortable with. It will step out of that before the end of the track.
Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
God is with us, He's with us now.
All right, so yeah, her vocals are just beautiful and it's really haunting already. So the imagery is very clear, right? Light breaks through, the overexposed light within the church that was really dark before, and now a light breaks through the clouds and is shining on them. And so yeah, this gets to kind of the message of hope. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel, again, God with us shall come to thee. That was the prophecy, that was the promise that God made to his people. God with us shall come to you, the suffering people of Israel. And so the reason that the church sings this song and not just Jewish people is because within the Bible story, Jesus opened the doors of his kingdom to more people than just the Israelites, but also anybody who was willing to follow him. And so that's why it's okay for Christians to sing this song. This is alluding to a lot of the stories of Israel in captivity, but it speaks to the broader human condition that God has come to save us. And so the difficulty, I think, is coming in from a lot of these what's called like health and wealth gospel, where a lot of preachers of mega churches, big influential figures are saying, oh, if you believe in God, you shouldn't be suffering. You should be able to, it's called like name it and claim it theology, where if you name the disease or the condition or the problem that you're dealing with, and then you pray about it hard enough and you have enough faith, then God's going to take that problem away from you. You have that power from God to be able to make your existence and life here comfortable. And so honestly, like the implications of that, while it sounds like really good, is that that's just not how the world works. And what happens is when there's a problem that you can't just pray away, or you can't just read your Bible enough or be religious enough to get rid of that problem, for instance, things like depression or anxiety or trauma or any other mental health condition or other problem going on, then it becomes an indictment of the person as, oh, well, you just don't have enough faith. And that's where there's a lot of discomfort with, you can be Christian and you can still suffer. Now, historically, that was actually one and the same thing, that Jesus said himself, that to be one of his followers, you are going to suffer and you're gonna face trials, you're gonna face struggles, and God's not paving a golden path for you here on earth. But we've lost that in American Christianity, where now we're very uncomfortable talking about, oh, someone might be suffering, someone might be having a challenge with their mental health, and we don't know what to do with that because we have this idea so ingrained that, oh, if God is with me, then my life should be easy. And that makes songs of lament and mourning very difficult to fit into kind of this broadly American evangelical mindset. Now, again, I'm being very specific about these terms because I know this is not how all Christians believe, but there's a broad group of Christians in America that are very vocal, that are very public, that share this kind of message, and it's a huge turnoff because it doesn't address the reality of people are struggling and having difficulties in their lives, and they just get told, you don't have enough faith or you're not giving enough money to, well, usually it's my church specifically. That's what these pastors kind of preach, and it's not actually welcoming. It's not actually that God has come to save you. It's that you can save yourself. You're just not trying hard enough, which is a message that we're really trying to counteract within the mental health field. Sometimes it's not just about you're not trying hard enough. I think people who struggle with mental illnesses have heard that their entire lives, and to hear it from the church also is not super attractive. And it's also not based in the actual message of what Jesus came to proclaim.
Oh, come, Emmanuel.
Oh, come thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here.
So you've got this repeated image of, I think it's new life growing on rocks that were previously barren and empty. The idea of, again, that word Advent, the coming of Jesus, the coming of God into earth. Because the fundamental message of the Bible was that God's people, or people in general, could not do it themselves. And so you need a supernatural intervention of life growing on previously empty rocks, of light breaking through the darkness. And honestly, there's not a lot of space within broadly American evangelical culture for that kind of message, because that is a huge message of equality. Nobody is good enough to do it themselves. They need divine intervention to be saved. It's not how good you are, how wealthy you are, how attractive you are, how successful you are. None of that within the grand scheme of what this song is saying matters.
Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight.
And so you'll notice it's building, right? This message of O Come Emmanuel that started really isolated with just keys and just the reverb on the voice. Now you have two voices, more electric instruments, that arpeggiation just building and adding to that tension until it finally gets resolved. And even when you're playing this at church, one thing that's really interesting is that you have minor chords throughout the verse until you get to the chorus that says rejoice, rejoice, and then you switch into major chords. And so like the difference between minor and major chords is minor is typically kind of the sadder chord. It creates a tone that feels sad and lonely. And the major chords are the bright and happy ones. And so there's even musically that lends itself to the dichotomy between we're mourning and calling for God to come, and then in the chorus, when you switch to major chords, reminders of the promise. Okay, I had to stop it because there's a lot to say about this, but this is the part, right, that people had a lot of difficulty with. And again, if you think through like kind of that broader evangelical, like a lot of contemporary Christian music, which is a category in itself, is a lot like pop music, right? It's happy, it's bright, it's bubbly, really clean editing. When you get all this distortion and overdrive, and honestly, having been a longtime listener of Skillet, this is not as hard as it could have gone. Like the guitar solo was relatively tame compared to what I've heard in other tracks of theirs. Like the drums are not super over the top, but it's just like this genre of music. Like I said, in the beginning, that fit really well with like the normal pop kind of song, even though it was still in a minor key, it was still dealing with subject matter that was not primarily pop friendly. But I think what you get with a lot of this hard rock metal kind of sound is that the emotion comes through a lot more raw. It's not filtered as much. And so you get this unfiltered scream and the heavy drums and the heavy instrumentation that really lends itself to the spirit of the song of God's people are suffering. The earth is suffering and they're crying out to God to respond. And this is where I think American evangelicals have a huge problem with this, because we're so used to the idea that if we pray hard enough, God has to answer. God has to give me what I want. And that's just not the case. If we look at it biblically, the people of Israel were in exile, enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. You think they weren't crying out, yelling, screaming, praying for God to respond in that time? But then it took 400 years for him to respond. I'm not getting into the theology and like the debate about like why God chooses to wait on that. But even in the periods between the Old Testament and the New Testament, between the last prophet and the last book of the Old Testament being written, there was 500-year gap between that where God's people had silence from God. God was not speaking through the prophets, through the Bible in that time, until Jesus breaks through into the world at 0 AD or 0 CE, whichever reference you want to use. So this really gets at the raw emotion of knowing that there's a world where things are wrong, or even just personally in our lives that things are wrong, things are not right, things are not the way they're supposed to be. And sometimes we have to struggle with that, and God does not answer on our schedule. God does not give us exactly what we want either. And so I think both music stylistically it's difficult for a lot of mainstream, if you want to call it like cultural Christians, which are used to like the CCM kind of like pop sound, very clean, very kind of filtered. And this is not an aspersion on contemporary Christian artists. This is just a little outside the norm of what maybe people are used to hearing, especially in conjunction with Christmas music. And then of course, the other piece is just that in our understanding of our relationship with God is a little skewed to think that he's more like a genie, that like, oh, if I just pray hard enough, he's gonna answer, he's gonna give me what I want. More wealth, be healthy, happy family, success at work, success in other places. And this song really wrestles with the idea that it doesn't necessarily happen on our timetable. And sometimes we have to be here and mourn and scream and be dealing with our emotions. And that's where historically there's been some difficulties with the discussions about what biblical counseling is, where it is just conforming to do these religious things and then God will take care of the rest and you'll be healthy and that'll deal with the mental health struggles that you have. And it's just not always a case like that. It's not that cut and dry. It's not that simple. So again, back to the great music.
Come, oh, come, Emmanuel.
He's with us now.
Okay, so that ending is actually really important. You have the huge breakdown, the scream, the guitar solo, and then they go back through the chorus, really big, distortion, heavy guitar, heavy drums, right? And then it resolves again with that single voice and the keys. O come Emmanuel. But then you hear what she sings in the end. He's with us now. And so that's the tension that we need to struggle with any faith, honestly. Faiths give us this sense of like, there is something better. This is something that we're working towards. And, you know, based on different religions, different faiths, the way that we get to paradise or the way that things will get better in the world are explained differently. But the tension is, okay, there's a religion or there's a faith that's promising something better, but we also have to struggle with the reality that we're not there. Like very clearly we're not there. In our individual lives as a society, things are not perfect. Things are not the way that they should be. And how do we deal with that tension? And so for Christianity, the answer is what she's saying in the last line, he's with us now. And so that's the bridge between the mourning, the lament, and the calling out for God to intervene, for God to rescue, and sometimes having to wait what feels like 400 or 500 years before he responds. And then the promise is fulfilled, again, within the story of the Bible, with Jesus coming down to earth. And so this is where, like, if you're a person of faith, first of all, if you're a Christian, this is a reality that we need to get used to. Christianity was not meant to be sanitized or cleaned up, because honestly, like, the reason Jesus is a big deal, the reason Christmas is a big deal, was because we as humans screwed everything up so badly that God needed to step down and be the one who did all the work for us. So this is not about us being good. This is not about us being so happy. We rejoice that God did that, but we need to be able to live in the tension of the world is screwed up because we've made it screwed up. And we need to remember that our cultural moment is not historically how Christianity was supposed to be defined. Early Christianity in Rome, defined by martyrdom, being persecuted, being killed for our faith, and we're here complaining about not having 10 commandments or prayer in school and all that stuff. Again, separate kind of political, social conversation, but that's where we're at in terms of this cultural Christianity of fighting so hard for these little things and saying that we're being attacked. And then just for people of faith in general, people who are exploring some kind of spirituality or connection to something larger, yeah, this is a real tension that it should be addressed by all faith systems that, yeah, the world sucks right now. What is to be done about that? Where is our hope in all of that? And again, connecting it back to the world of mental health, like hope, having a sense of purpose, having a sense of connection to something bigger than us is vital. Having resiliency to be able to endure through struggles that we're having, mental health wise, physically, socially, any kind of situation, that sense of purpose and connection makes it more likely for us to be able to overcome and struggle with this without it breaking us down. So do I think this song is demonic? No, I don't think so. I think it's outside of what a lot of people are comfortable hearing, especially if this was the first track of Skillet that you heard, and you heard that first like 2/3 being really like light and haunting and beautiful, and then it breaks down and it's kind of intentionally more ugly and distorted. Like, that's gonna throw you. And I think what a lot of Christians default to, like, this is a demonic thing, and I don't know why that is, but we need to have space as Christians to have honest emotionality and then to be able to engage with that without being scared of it. I think that a lot of this health and wealth gospel came about because people were scared. They didn't think God was big enough to handle people's struggles. And that actually reflects a scaredness or a timidness on our part, broadly speaking, again, as Christians, to be able to engage that, like, hey, not everyone has it together, not everyone's perfect. And we forget that sometimes, and that's what leads us to being very wary of songs like this that deal with that very honestly. So please drop your comments below. I know this is a departure from the NF video that we did last time, but I think the realness of it is consistent. Again, that's not like Skillet's main brand in terms of like real music like NF's is, but it is fascinating also just because they're both Christian artists. They're both a little outside the mainstream of what we think of as Christian artists, but they're dealing with realness and pain and struggle kind of in similar ways. But I'm just curious about your comments below. Compare and contrast. Let me know what you think of the music itself and the message that it's bringing. So thank you for sticking with me through some of the religious lessons as I break down some of that. Again, I wanted to make sure that I didn't assume that everyone knew what everything in the song was talking about. And so I felt uniquely positioned in doing music at church as well as being a therapist to address some of the clashes and the difficulty that people were having with this song. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you all next time.